Hey, everybody. Welcome to Pro Mindset. This is your host, Craig Domann. Today, I have a gentleman on as our guest. His name is Gabe Nosseir. Gabe is a Shamanic Practitioner. We're going to find out what that means. He's a life coach. He's a soccer coach. He's a father. He's a former athlete who was not an elite athlete, but had the drive of an elite athlete. And he realized he didn't have the mindset he needed to have to be who he wanted to become. So he now helps other people maximize their potential by being everything they can become. So Gabe, welcome to Pro Mindset today.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so like I do every time, everybody wants to know who you are, what you're about, where you've been, where you're going, what you do. Share with everybody your story. My understanding is right now you live in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah.
Take it away.
Down south from you, so a hop, skip, and a jump away. My background, I've got a really interesting background. I have a Brazilian mother, an Egyptian father. They met in Brazil, we moved to the U.S. very early. I kind of bounced around after they split up, lived in Brazil, the Middle East a bit. So I have like a global perspective because of them. And obviously there's a big soccer influence in both of those cultures, and I'm glad that it's starting in the U.S. So I grew up playing soccer. I was a very average athlete. I grew up with two very peaceful and non-competitive parents, so they didn't really get me in those right environments. I didn't really have that elite level mindset as a player. And it started to kind of shift and change very late for me, about my senior year of high school. And finally something clicked about just working harder, being more confident, doing the extra work that it takes to improve myself. But it was too late for me. So luckily, that actually propelled me to coach soccer. So I started coaching in my high school, eventually got into club soccer, and had a lot of success with developing players. It was something finally where I was like, oh, I'm actually pretty good at this. And I'm going to keep doing coaching licenses, getting the education, and using my intuition. When I was in college, I studied communications and psychology. Eventually, I got a master's degree in counseling. I was coaching elite level youth soccer, traveling a lot and gaining a lot of experience, and really focusing on the psychological aspects with my players, not just individually, but as a team as well, and how to better influence communication with these guys, with each other. Felt for me as a soccer coach, I was good at the X's and O's and really good at bringing out potential in players. And at the time, I was also running an indoor soccer arena that I owned and operated. And I did that for 20 years. And towards the end of it, I was kind of getting burned out on it and really wanted to help people on a deeper level. So I started working with a life coach and became trained under him, and started to combine my two hobbies of soccer and life coaching, and started working with athletes and helping them. And luckily, I had a nice pool, because I was in the soccer community here in Albuquerque, working with different players, and including players at the University of New Mexico who went on to play professionally. So kind of moving forward, I sold the indoor arena, and then I got introduced to the world of shamanism, which, for those who don't know, shamanism has its deep roots in indigenous cultures and a deep, deep connection to nature. So not just Mother Earth, but all the elements, but also the nature inside of us. We're these spiritual beings having a human experience. And you can also learn how to use Mother Nature and all of the Father Sky and all the directions, because each direction has its own power, north, south, east, and west. And essentially going to use that to help us grow the more spiritual side of us. And I think what I've seen in sports right now is, there's obviously a focus on the psychological, technical, tactical, and physical side of sports, basically the four pillars of every sport. And there's also starting to be this more spiritual side that's happening, in spiritual growth, and people are like craving meditation and breath work and visualization, those kind of things. The shamanic aspect of it really helps to build that personal power that we all have, because we're all, like I said, we're these spiritual beings having a human experience right now. But what we also are, we're frequency. So if you think of like a light bulb with a dimmer switch. We can turn it up and down, right? There are certain things in our lives that dim our light. And then, but in order to control the power, we have to be aware that we can control the power and lift that switch up. So that's been a really nice addition into the work that I've been doing, not just for other people, but really for myself, because I live and breathe these things as well.
Okay. All right, Gabe, we're going to bounce around, but I'm going to go back to when you were a competitor. You had this fire that was naturally born in you because your parents were not competitive people. And you wanted to be an athlete and you wanted to be a performer. And it just so happens that a lot of the best coaches are guys like that. They were not the guy that didn't have to work hard, didn't have to think himself through the game, didn't have to visualize himself doing it before he did it, because he could just show up, maybe even be hungover and still get it done. And you were one of those guys. I wasn't one of those guys either. So most people aren't. So on the coaching front, what is the way that you handle young people, athletes that are blessed with so much God-given ability? They're sugar freaks, but they don't have the mental. Their mental side does not, measure up to the same standard as their physical. How do you help those people grow into being their best self when they've already got the tools? They've got the physical skills. They've got the physical body.
Right. Everybody's different and unique. So I look at everyone uniquely, but there's a commonality that I like to focus on with the people that I'm working with. And one is, I call it metacognitive awareness. So that's the understanding that our reality is always created with our thinking in the moment. It's that our thinking comes from two different places. We have these two sides of us, a light side and kind of a dark side. So our light side is called essence. And that's when, things our innate genius is coming through and we're operating from our hearts in a place of love. And then we have this other more shadowy side called our false self. And a lot of people call that the ego. And so I'm just going to keep using that term because it's pretty common. Though ego can be a healthy sense of ego and then a non-healthy sense of ego, right? So when our non-healthy sense of our shadow side, our false self, our ego is operating, it's telling us all these things, all these doubts about ourselves and about other situations. And the more we can understand that we have these two sides of us, like the awareness has to start. And then we can shift from that ego side over more into essence and take a deep breath and recenter ourselves. So the more that we understand that it's actually our reality in the moment, that our thinking in the moment is creating our reality, then that increases the awareness and we can understand we have the power to start to change and to shift those thoughts. And what I tell people, a good analogy that I'd like to give, I'll give one. We had the game 1 of the NBA Finals yesterday, right? And, if I ask people in Boston, did the Celtics winning yesterday, did that make you happy? Them directly winning, did that directly make you happy? And they'll say, oh, yeah, of course, And I say, well, I'm going to disagree here, and here's why. Because if I say the Boston Celtics winning, if I ask all the people in Dallas, did that make you happy? They're going to say no, right? So it's basically like all these things that happen are very neutral. Everything is neutral, but people in Boston have a different perspective. People in Dallas have a different perspective. People in other places are going to have different perspectives as well, right? So when people start to see that and be like, it is my belief system that is creating my reality, then you can start to see like, the difference between Trump and Biden is very neutral. It just depends on what your perspective is. Everything in the world. And people can start to shift and say, you know what? I have the power to start to create my own reality in the moment. So that's a big, big one, is for people to understand that they have the power, they have the control. When they start to give control and power, when they start to believe other people make them upset, other people make them happy, then you're giving your power away to other people when really it's within you. So that's a huge, huge part of it. And then we get into more of like the spiritual side of it and going in, focusing on the meditation and breath work. And I call that transcendental awareness. And that is the understanding that there's something greater to you that's outside of your individual perception of yourself. you're part of something that's greater. I like to use an analogy for Star Wars fans. It's the Force. The Force is all around us, and we're part of the Force as well. That we're all interconnected. And then when you start to go deeper into that, then you can get into the meditation, the breath work, the stuff that I'm talking about, getting you into an altered state, kind of focus in on like your frequency and your energy, and to increase your awareness of yourself. And, there's the first step is to be aware, start being aware of things around you, and then you can become aware of the fact that you're aware. So being aware that you're aware. So, it sounds a little interesting, but it's really true. And so the more we're aware of ourselves and the more we're connected more deeply inside of ourselves beyond our thinking, that helps to increase intuition. And that helps to get into flow state and to operate more from just flowing instead of thinking your way through sports. And for me personally, that was my issue. It was like too much in my head and didn't believe in myself and beating myself down. So whenever I work with people, I really focus in on like slowing down, taking a deep breath to recenter yourself when you're kind of spun up and not believing in yourself, and know that you have the power to shift inside of you at any moment. And then a big part of my work, once I start getting deeper into people, working with people, we start to really focus in on an increase of self-awareness, and especially the ego and the false self. We have this perception. When I ask pretty much every workshop that I talk to kids or players that I'm working with, I say, when I say the word ego, what do you think about? And it's like somebody that thinks they're better than somebody else, right? And it's essentially arrogance. And I say, okay, yeah, that is one way the ego shows up. But the ego shows up in more ways than that. It shows up in arrogance. It also shows up in self-deprecation. So beating up on yourself and not believing in yourself. It shows up with greed, not believing that there's nothing is ever enough. And it shows up in self-destruction, doing things that aren't healthy for you, whether it's drinking, smoking, eating certain foods, doing whatever. There's also martyrdom, right? Believing that you're the victim and other people are out to get you and nobody's on your side. It shows up as impatience, and then it also shows up as stubbornness as well, which closes somebody off from learning more. So that's more of the deeper side when we start to get into those things, and for people to understand, because we all have two of those main. I call them, the people in my community and my teachers call them dragons. So we all have two kind of main dragons. Mine typically are martyrdom and stubbornness. So I've really been focusing on shifting that because it's a part of who we are. Our ego's not going anywhere. So it's a matter of like, how do we shift from operating from our ego and getting into our essence and our higher self to be able to operate at a higher level. So that's it's a long-winded version of what I do with people right there.
That's very detailed, Gabe. And you know what? I was able to follow about 95% of what you talked about. Let's go back to, do you call it metacognitive? Is that what you called the first one?
Basically, yeah, we understand.
Okay, so let's go back there. I call that our pocket voice. And in your pocket voice, it always shows up in big moments. It always shows up in pressure moments. And so like in a soccer match, we were talking about soccer before the show here, and let's say it's a shootout, and you're the last person to shoot for your team, kick for your team. But it doesn't matter if you make it or not because you've already won. No pressure. Pocket voice is silent. But let's pretend like it's 4-4, and you're the last person. And if you make it, you win. You miss it, you get to go again. You do second round of a shootout. That's when it shows up.
Later.
And so depending on your worthiness, depending on your whether you feel like you really were all in on this match, like if you're a kid and you had a sleepover the night before, or you're an adult and you ate something for breakfast you probably shouldn't have, that wasn't really for you, wasn't going to serve your best interest in the game. If you have those kind of things that have happened in your recent, your pocket voice is going to go, man, you shouldn't have had that coffee this morning before the game. Or, hey, man, you shouldn't have had the donuts. Whoever it is, and whatever it is can be different. So the pocket voice has a way of ebbing and flowing depending on what kind of relationship you have with that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a positive relationship with that moment, and you should have already been at that moment, because before the game, the night before, the week before, many nights before, if you have meditation and visualization as part of your preparation and planning before a game, you were already in that moment and you already played that kick in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, and you saw yourself being successful, there's a high probability you will be successful. And there's also a high probability that the pocket voice is going to be the essence part, not the dark part.
Exactly.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right. In those pressure situations, that's when that voice comes up. With the metacognitive awareness, what I teach people is to just be aware of your thinking. So, we can understand that, like, we create our own thoughts, but also we can observe our thoughts as well. So you can just kind of identify of like this pocket voice. It's like, oh, hey, that's the pocket voice again. That's not who I am. And then recenter yourself, and a big part of recentering for me is taking a deep breath. And you see that a lot with players who are taking those PKs at the end of games, right? They walk up, they're focused in on the ball, and they take that breath, right? And that breath just lets that energy go, and it recenters yourself. It recenters your nervous system. It's amazing what the breath can do. So that's the in the moment stuff. The stuff before, you were talking about the night before, visualizing that you've already made that kick. And, visualizing and seeing it happen is really, really important. What I add with players is, you see it, but also you have to feel it. What does it feel like for your foot to hit the ball? What does it feel like to see it go in? And then feel your energy field, right? Visualize your energy and feel it within yourself, because we're thinking creatures, but we're also feeling creatures as well. And so, it's not enough just to like see it. Like, it's more and more important to feel it. And that's where like the depths of manifesting comes in. It's like you have to feel that energy.
I agree with that. And if I would ask you to share with me your high points and your low points from your soccer playing career.
My playing career
The
was
only memories you would have would be the ones that are connected to an emotion. And it was either an extreme positive emotion or extreme negative emotion. Otherwise, you don't remember. Like if I asked you, hey, in your fourth game of your senior year, when you played, you hosted your arch rival in the 22nd minute of the first half of the game, what happened? You like, I have no idea. But if I ask you, hey, what was your biggest failure as a senior in high school playing soccer? You could tell me. You could tell me who you were playing, what the situation was, and what you wanted to do, but what you didn't do, and what you regret that you didn't do. Because there's an emotion. I really feel like our memory is just a file of emotions.
Yeah.
And so to take that to what you're talking about, if you visualize yourself creating a movie of you being the superstar in every scene, but there's no emotion connected to that movie, it's meaningless. It's meaningless. You did what your life coach told you to do. You visualized it. You spent 15 minutes, maybe you did breath work ahead of time, then you had meditation time, and then you intentionally visualized you being the hero of the game. But you had no emotional connection to that movie. It won't manifest in the game.
Absolutely. You absolutely need to connect that last bit. So that's very wise. And you're absolutely right that those memories of failure are so much more deeply ingrained into your energy field, because energy, like emotions, get stuck inside your body and your energy field. And that actually can lead to a lot of issues, physical issues down the road. Right. So it's important to just feel all the emotions as much as possible, not just the good ones. Like, yeah, I want to feel this one, but to like welcome in all those other ones that don't feel so good as well, and to like allow it to kind of push out of you and to just run through your system. and it does connect, and those failures are huge. And when I talk to parents, I really push that. I had a podcast called Clarity for Parents of Athletes, and it was really focused in on it for parents to understand how to better help their athletes. And, one big thing is think about your life, as all the moments that you grew in your life, were they the moments that were all like fun and games, or were they the most difficult times, And then the parents say, well, yeah, it was like the times that were more difficult. I'm like, okay, why would you want to take that away from your child, and protect them? And we're in this moment. I don't want to digress too much, but right, like parents want to protect their children a lot of times instead of encouraging them. Like, yeah, you got to make mistakes. You have to go through the school of hard knocks. That's how you're going to get better. And we forget about that with ourselves as well, And it's tough for the professional athlete when money's on the line, job's on the line, right? If they make too many mistakes, right? So it's learning for them to learn to both understand that's a reality for themselves, but also how to work through that, right? Because that's part of life.
Okay, Gabe, you have any kids?
I do. I have 2 kids.
How old are they?
One is 24 and one is 10.
Okay. That's a great, the time span in between is great because you're not even going to be close to the same parent for the 10 as you were the 24.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I hear it from the older one about the differences that she sees.
Oh, I'm sure.
How I parented her. And I'm not her biological father. I met her when she was 7, but she's in every way my daughter. Yeah, she met me when I was a younger version of myself, and I was coaching this, elite level youth team. And I was like, okay, I see what this girl needs in her life, more structure and discipline. And so I tried to raise her like I was raising this soccer team of boys, super competitive boys, and that was not the way to go. So she taught me a tremendous amount about how to be a better parent. And luckily, my son is the one who's really benefiting from it.
Okay, so having a 10-year-old who I'm sure likes athletes or likes sports in some fashion, fair?
A little bit. Yeah, he's much more musically oriented. So that's kind of his thing. And that's where, I'm I do the best to put him in the right environments. Because my daughter was a water polo player and a swimmer, and she was a really good water polo player, actually trained at the Olympic Training Center with her age group for a couple of years. And, so to have the drastic differences, I was putting her in the right environments for her. And now I'm like, okay, I got to put my son in the right environments for him. And he was in the Youth Symphony Orchestra here in Albuquerque. And, so it's kind of the same mentality, but in 2 different fields.
Okay. So having a 10-year-old, you're really getting a do-over, a second chance to hopefully let him reveal his gifts, his passions, his dreams, his goals, and you're going to be a supporter and a spectator. And I'm guessing that's not your area of expertise either, what he wants to do.
No. I mean, I love you. No, violin.
So now you're trusting other people with your kid, like other people, parents have had to trust you with their kids in soccer. Mm-hmm. So walk me through creating for any parents that may be listening, walk them through the do's and don'ts and the whys of this is what you should do with your child who has a passion in something and has some giftedness too. And they have to learn the things like how to, recover after failure, disappointment, things like that. They have to learn how to train hard. They have to learn how not to compare themselves all the time. They can't use the scoreboard of perfection as the measuring stick. Mm-hmm. No, they don't have to be perfect. They just have to be their best. The goal is to be your best. So what would your parent manual look like for parents that have kids that are 10, 12, that burnout's just around the corner? Mm-hmm. Most of them are not going to get college scholarships. Very few are going to play in the pros. So they want their son or daughter to have the full experience so that they can take that into their career after sport or after whatever they do.
So I think the foundation of what I talk to people about, parents, especially, is they have, in order for them to excel and succeed, your child has to love it. love what they're doing because the work ethic has to come from them. And I interviewed a lot of high-level athletes. Every single one of them, they understood the drive had to come within them. Their parents, they couldn't push them into loving something, but a parent, what they can do is push them out of loving something with putting too much pressure on them. And I've seen it so many times with players, and I've seen it where players loved the game, but still had like the parental pressure coming along with it. And it really like stunted their full development. And there's one player I have in particular in mind who was like incredibly talented, offensive player especially, but didn't have like the exact needs from what he needed from his dad especially. And, he even still went on a high level. Like talent can take you so far, but when you get to that top percent, the elite athletes, you have to have the right mentality. So for parents, it's one analogy I had was like, it's so good for parents to understand for them to be there with their child, but be in the background, not the foreground. And so many parents want to, right? Because they want to control things because parents have to understand egos are so easy to like start running the show and to, make up for what they lacked as a child or have fear for whatever is going to happen to their parent or to their child that their child is going to miss out on something, right? And then it starts getting into not trusting the coaches and all kinds of things, So it's for them to understand like their ego can easily run the show and to just let them have their journey. They will learn so much more if they're just loved at home and have like a foundation of unconditional love at home and to understand that they're always going to be loved by parents. Probably the most profound thing that one of the athletes I interviewed, her name was Ashley McIver. She was an Olympic gold medal skier in Canada in the ski cross and won the first ever gold medal in that event. It was in Vancouver, and that's where her hometown was Whistler, and that's where she was from. But she told me her big advice was like, children put so much pressure on themselves. They receive so much pressure from their coaches, their teammates. The last people they need pressure from is from their parents. And that really spoke volumes, So that's what I really encourage parents to do is just take a look at themselves and just to trust their kids' process, and talk to them and have discussions, not lectures, ask them questions, how they're feeling, but don't overdo it. So there's this fine line, of like letting them kind of have their own journey and just like talking to them every once in a while about what their experience is and not trying to be forceful on them. And a lot of parents have that. Have a difficult time.
I agree. I would say that to add on to that, Gabe, is the concept of when things are going really, really well for a kid, the parents feel 10x more joy than the actual child does.
Yep.
And conversely, when the athlete is struggling, misunderstood by his or her coach, not really sinking in with the teammates, not feeling like they're part of the club, It hurts the athlete, but it hurts the parents 10x. And when you're feeling pain for your child, it's more severe typically than what it is for yourself. Mm-hmm. So parents can't help themselves. They got to go talk to the coach. They got to tell the kid to go talk to the coach. Mm-hmm. And I think the opposite is true. I don't think you go talk to the coach for your kid. And I don't even think the coaches, when you coached, did you ever not share your expectations with your team?
Always. And the parents.
You did share. And the parents.
Yep.
So they knew what to expect. They knew what you were going to reward. They knew what you were going to penalize. They knew did they not know that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's say, for example, I'm the player. I'm one of your players. And I go, hey, Coach Gabe, can you tell me what I can do to get on the field more? That's the dumbest question in the world. Mm-hmm. You've been telling me all season. You've been telling me every day in practice. All I'm going to tell my player in that situation is, I just need you to pay attention in practice. Mm-hmm. I've already told you hundreds of times. Because talking to coaches pisses coaches off. Mm-hmm. Now they start holding a grudge against the player. So that's number one. Is my philosophy is don't talk to the coach. He's already telling you what he wants to tell you. And yes, there are some coaches that are not authentic. There's some coaches that say, hey, man, if you're early, if you're this and this and this, you're going to be my guy, you're going to play. And yet they reward somebody that doesn't do all those things.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to understand that your coach is human and your coach is not going to be perfect. And if they're batting 95%, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to bat 100% on anything they say because we're all human.
Right.
The second thing I see, Gabe, is this. And I've been tempted as a dad. Something's not going well with your kid, with this sport. And you tell him, hey, the coach is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Coach doesn't know what he's talking about. Coach really doesn't see your value. Just to make your kid feel better and to make you feel better.
Right.
But all you do is make it worse. You make it worse.
Yep.
So I think one of the things that's really awesome, let's go back to when a young child is learning how to walk and they fall. They don't fall very far because they're not 6 foot tall.
Yeah.
And they're so nimble that they kind of bounce back up anyway. It's like nobody's really scared they're going to, break a leg if they fall when they're trying to walk. So the parents let them fall. Parents understand intuitively that if I let him fall, eventually he's going to be able to walk. That
Right.
same concept needs to be applied when they're 12 and 15 and 18 and 10. Let them fall.
Mm-hmm.
You don't, like when your kid is first learning how to walk, the first time they fall, you don't go, time out. You're going to have to take a couple days off here because you fell and I don't want you to break your legs or crack your kneecaps. So we got to take a break. You're not going to do any more walking for a while.
Right.
No, you want him to walk right now. You want him to keep going. And so with your kids, you don't take them out of the team. You don't not show up. You don't take a practice off. You don't do things like, you don't play games. You let them sit in the failure. Let them sit in it. They'll figure it out.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I would always encourage my son when he was little is, like, if you fall, get up. Just get back up. Yeah. And you do it again. There should be no such thing as failure, only lessons. And we can do that for our kids and we can do that for ourselves as well. Because you're right. Like, we don't stop being human just because we become adults. We still are always learning about life, learning deeper about ourselves, and how we operate. So it's across the board, parenting's not easy, whatsoever. But the more we can understand, we're not going to have all the right answers, but we can always do our best. Just there's this common saying, right, in sports, like, just get 1% better every day at everything. And that can, it doesn't stop at us as parents, as whether we're professional athletes or professional other things, 1% better every day on all levels of our life. It's amazing what happens, just that little bit of progress.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We covered a little bit about metacognitive mental space. Let's talk a little bit about transcendental awareness in terms of plant medicine and shamanism and ceremonies and what how does that help? That's obviously not for young kids, but for, let's say you're a professional athlete in any sport and you still think you're defined by that bad play you had in the playoffs the year before. You still think you're defined by the championships you didn't win instead of the championships you did. You still think you're defined by not getting drafted as high as you wanted to, or as high as people thought you would. How does your practice of plant medicine help people in those situations?
Well, the plant medicine is something different, so it has definitely shaped my life a bit. It's not for kids, for sure. It's not for every adult either, as well. So, it's more the shamanic root goes beyond plant medicine. It's more of like the deep roots of working through our shadow self so we can operate more from our hearts, right? And our essence. So,
hang on a second. What do you mean by operating out of your heart?
Yeah.
Has anybody ever asked you, what does that mean?
Yeah. So that's the connection with essence, with our higher self. When you are your best, whenever you play and you're in slow state, right? You're in this different kind of zone, right? It's the zone, right? And you are just flowing and feeling and operating through intuition instead of being stuck in your head and thinking your way through it. And you have this big sense of joy, right? It's fun. Everything's just like enjoyable. And so, that's what I really encourage is for people to tap into that sense of joy because it comes out in your game. When you're able to go out there and you play and you can push through any kind of quote unquote failures that you're experiencing. If your North Star is loving the game and loving what you're doing and loving to compete, loving your teammates, even loving your opponents, the referees, everything, every single aspect of it, then you can, right, you keep in that flow state, you keep in the zone that way. So it's basically getting out of your head and into your heart, right? So now what I work with athletes, going back to your question, is, a lot of players, I mean, humans in general, right? We start playing a sport very young and we become identified. This is who we are, right? We're a soccer player, we're a football player, we're basketball, baseball, whatever it is. This is who we are, right? And the transcendental awareness goes beyond that. It's like that, hey, this is a small part of who you are, but there's a bigger part of who you are. Again, going back to the early part of this interview, right? We're these spiritual beings having a human experience. And how that experience looks is different for everybody, right? So it's getting out of that self-identity of like, this is who we are. No, that's not who you are. This is just what you do right now at this portion in your life. Because these, professional athletes especially, and it can be youth level, at any level really, that's overly identified themselves as one thing. When that thing is gone, when retirement happens, which happens to 100% of professional athletes, 100%. If you're totally identified, too much identified with that's who you are, it's gone like that. And then all of a sudden you're having a self-identity crisis. And I've seen that with people. So the more we can understand we're greater than what we do and our perception of ourselves, and we're connected more deeply with more of our essence and who we are, right? Through meditation, I mentioned altered states of consciousness, but meditation is an altered state of consciousness, right? Breath work is an altered state of consciousness. So, there's not just plant medicine that gets you there. That's one way to do it, of course. But, and you see that it's becoming more and more popular with players like Aaron Rodgers or, promoting it, trying to have these deep experiences. But there are many ways to get deeper sense of who you actually are as a spiritual being. But one, you have to have that kind of altered state of consciousness. And so, I take people through guided visualizations, meditations, different things like that to help get them there.
Okay. There's probably a lot of people on this listening or watching that don't really understand what breath work is. Everybody sees LeBron on the bench sometimes taking deep breaths. Not everybody, but a lot of basketball players take a deep breath or two before they shoot a free throw. What is breath? What is your definition of breath work? What's the benefit? How much time does it take? How does it show up on the court or on the field or in the pool or whatever?
Mm-hmm. There's different types of breathing exercises, but it's all about doing the same thing. It's kind of regulating your nervous system and calming yourself down, bringing your baseline back down, and we can do this even if we're having an argument with our partner or our child, right? And we're kind of in that moment of recognizing like, hey, I need to do something to ground myself right now. So breath work can take anywhere from just one breath really to kind of start that process to like deeper work. Some people can sit there and focus for many minutes. I'm not one of those people that can sit there for 60 minutes and just focusing on breath. Love to be maybe someday. For me, I do a few different ones. One thing that I love to do is to either like breathe in through my heart, focusing on every breath going in and out from my heart, not necessarily my lungs, right? But it's deep breaths in and then a slow, deep breath out through my heart. Or another one I like to do is just to start with a point just below my belly, about 2 inches below your belly button in your sacral chakra. We have basically 7 main chakras, which are these energy fields, energy points and centers. So I like to start there, breathe in, and visualize that the breath is and the energy is going down into my root chakras, which is kind of below your groin area, and then up the back. This is still the breath in, so it takes about 7 seconds, and then coming up over the back, over the crown chakra on the top of your head, and then in the front of your third eye, and holding it right there for 4 seconds, and then breathing out on the way down to fill your throat chakra, your heart chakra, and then your solar plexus, which is 2 inches above your belly button, and then going back down into the sacral chakra. I do that for about 4 breaths, and I'm like ready to go. So it doesn't take much time, but it really gets you centered in an amazing way. And it's becoming so much more popular, which is great to see. And, the first coach, that I really looked up to, I didn't know him, but was Phil Jackson, who implemented this with the Bulls, when Michael Jordan was there. And Jordan, I think, became the player he did, not just because he started sharing the ball and trusting his teammates, but because Phil Jackson introduced him to meditation and breathing exercises. And you could see it. While the national anthem is playing, he had his eyes closed, right? And he was focused in on his breath and sometimes his chewing gum as well. I remember vividly seeing as a kid. So, I'm really glad that it's becoming more and more popular, and there's still a long way to go as well.
What do you do with your athletes that come to you that say, hey, I want you to be my life coach or my sport coach, and, I'm struggling and it matters the most.
Mm-hmm.
Tryouts, opportunity. The coach says, this is the drill that's going to decide who's going to start this week. This is the scrimmage, or this is the whatever. And they're really good. They do all the right things. They get their sleep. They visualize. They eat right. They train hard. Extremely coachable. But for some reason, they struggle when the lights are on. How would you help someone in that situation?
Well, a lot of coaches will say, well, you just go practice more, right? One part of the answer is like, are you doing those extra bits of work? Because sometimes it's amazing how 10 minutes extra work can really take a player far, right? It doesn't take that much, and it shouldn't take that much extra work. But what I like to do is I believe in you get into the root cause of what's going on. Like, what is your deepest fear? So if it's about, let's go to this example of, right, triad, and this player worried about this drill. And it's not about the drill. It's about, what are you fearing you're not going to get from this? And then really becoming aware. And this is part of the self-awareness work that I do, is like coming face to face with your fears, right? If you can say, okay, I'm not going to make this team, and my parents are going to be upset, or if it's a professional athlete, right, I'm not going to get a contract. I've got a mortgage all of a sudden, I'm going to have to, figure something out with my family. Those are very real things. So I say, okay, let's come to face with that. So first of all, let's feel that. What does that feel like? And I'll take them through an exercise for them to really sit and feel that and ingrain themselves in the deepest, darkest places of themselves, just to feel it, right? And just to be aware of the fact that they're feeling it and they're thinking it, and not need to shift or change anything. And then from there, we can go into, okay, so let's say you didn't make this team. You didn't get that contract. So now what? Like, well, I can go try out for another team, or I can, my career is going to be ready, or is done, because I like to take people into the deepest, darkest places. So it's like, all right, let's say your career is done. And then what? What does that feel like? And then so they feel into that. Right, into that disappointment, into that frustration, into the fear of the unknown of what's going to happen. And I say, okay, so now we've felt that, we've looked at that, right? That you don't have a contract, your career's over, and now what? And then they think of the next thing, right? Well, I guess I'll figure something out. I'll go back to school, or, I have a degree in this, I can get a job, I know people. And so they keep going, like basically that same exercise, going from place to place to place, thinking along, feeling along, until you finally get to, I'm going to be all right. everything's going to be all right.
What you've effectively done there when you do that exercise, you've brought the future to the present. You've taken them from a future failure, future mind space that they're not wanting to get to. They do not want to go there. They don't even know how bad it is. They just know it's going to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
And you've given them, in some respects, an out of body experience, because they're talking about themselves almost as a third person. Like, yeah, that's going to stop. That's going to be this. But they're not feeling any pain right now.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So it's almost a third person experience of the worst case scenario that allows them to detach from that negative outcome, which is what you got to do if you want to be in the flow. You got to detach from all outcomes. You've just effectively worked them through the negative outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, their deepest fear, right? And going back to the pocket voice, right? Metacognitive awareness, right? The fact that we're thinking in the moment. It's amazing when you can get to the place where these thoughts come up and you can actually laugh at yourself. Some people call it the Buddha's laugh. And I've had this experience where I'm like, something pops in my head and I know that's not who I am anymore. That's like an old program. But I can step back and like observe it and just like laugh at myself, right? Just like, here we go again, that voice, And because we believe it to be so real. And that's the issue with all the suffering in the world. It's like we're believing our thoughts to be real, right? And that's the big part of suicide is people are just sucked into their thoughts, right? And that's really what it is, and they're suffering. But if they can take a moment and be like, even in the deepest, darkest times, like, oh, I want to, hurt myself, kill myself, I'm not good enough. You can actually look and be like, man, instead of believing that, you can say like, wow, something inside me really needs to change and needs to heal, and I'm going to go ahead and do this, And I've gotten to that point in my life before, with going through a lot of deep and really difficult experiences. But I knew the fact that like, oh, this is just a thought. This is not who I am. This is coming from my ego, my shadow side, my false self, And something needs to change within me. So now what am I going to do?
I think also when you've taken somebody through the valley, they're not so scared of the valley. Yeah. And then they can just they can perform how they prepared to perform, how they trained to perform. Whereas it's like I have a fear of snakes. Do you know how miserable it is for me? There's no snake. There's no snake out there. But I'm miserable. Just looking for the dang snake. I'm walking through the woods or whatever it is. I'm in the mountains. It's like, that's effectively what you're doing there is you're releasing them from their fears and doubts.
Absolutely.
By
and when you do that, sorry to interrupt, but when you do that, when you release yourself, or I help people to release themselves from that fear and doubt, that's when you can get into flow state so much easier. And that's what I'm talking about, is operating from the heart. And that's when you have more success.
I think one of the things that everybody wants is they want to get in the zone. And they've been in the zone, but they don't know how to replicate it. Or they've been in the flow and, they don't even care if the ball goes in. They just throw it at the basket and it goes in. And it's like, and everybody keeps feeding them the ball. It was like the Porzingis last night. I mean, he was on fire. And it was like he hadn't played in 39 days or whatever. But it's like he was in the zone. But he had nothing to lose. He hadn't played in 39 days. They've been winning without him. I think they swept in Indianapolis in 4 games. I'm not 100% sure about that. But anyway, bottom line is they didn't need him. He didn't even start.
Yeah.
And then he comes in and he's the guy.
Yeah.
So the head coach effectively took the pressure off him by having him be a substitute instead of being a starter. Expectations were lower. The fear of success, the fear of failure, all those things were gone. It was just a bonus to have him back.
Yep. He's having
all the pre-series hype was not about him. Yeah, he's coming back, but there was no hype on him. You go. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, he's having a good time, right? And just, you can imagine after a big break like that, you get to play in the NBA finals, like how excited you are, and that's how you can get more into the zone is if, you don't want to be overly excited. You just got to be just about right. And just to go in with that mentality of just like, I'm going to enjoy myself, and, you're absolutely right. It's hard to replicate the zone. Sometimes you get into it. When you get into it for the first time, you're like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing. Like what's going on here? And then you want to do it every single time. Right. And that's where the elite level guys can really like that. They separate themselves like the 1% of the 1% of athletes, right? They can get themselves into that mentality more, right? And a big part of it is like, okay, you've been there before. What did that feel like, right? So it goes back to feeling again. How can we get there, right? And that every athlete I work with who's going through a hard time and maybe experiencing those, the pocket voice, what I say is like, okay, be aware of that. And then what you do, you've got to increase your level of intensity and increase your level of focus and discipline. Both of those things. You can't have intensity without discipline and focus. Like you're going to have a nightmare. And you see a lot of players like that, even in just like one moment of the game, they lose their focus, right? But their intensity is high and that's not good, right? But if you can stay calm, keep a high level of intensity with a high level of focus and discipline, that helps to get back into the zone as well, right? The more you love it, like the more you love life and love what you're doing, the more you're going to enjoy, life. One of the athletes that really he sticks out to me, and he's come in my memory during this interview. I got to interview Doug Flutie, and I got to actually go to his house in Florida and get to know him because of my mentor and he are first cousins. And this guy, he was 5'8" on a good day, right? 5'9" maybe I think was his stats. I think he was 5'8.5", right? And I'm not a very tall person, and I was like next to him, and I was like, okay, I don't know, like, okay, how cute that is. But he loves life. He is, has such a youthful energy, and that's how he played. And he grew up playing sandlot football with his brothers every day after school, he said, every day. And he was just running and gunning, right? And that's how he played. And he just like still has this youthful energy about him. He just loves it, and that's what people need to approach life with, not just on a sporting arena, but outside of it as well. Even in the dark times, just like, yeah, this is life. This is what happens. And I'm going to move on from this. And, and then you can always shift back into yourself, even in the darkest times.
One of the things I tell my clients and my athletes is tap into your 7-year-old self. That's what Doug Flutie did.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in the zone, you're really 7. Mm-hmm. You're 7. You don't realize that you've made 5 in a row. You don't realize how rare that is. You don't realize that you're like taking over the game. You don't realize that you're going to get paid because of this kind of performance or win a championship or win a trophy or be an MVP or whatever it may be. You're 7.
Yeah.
You're just doing it for the fun of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get in competitive teams and you got coaches and practices and all these things going on, it all becomes serious. And now if you ever go in the zone, they're like thinking you should do it all the time. Like, man, snap into it. Let's go.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't. No, you have to have the mind of a child to be a superstar.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I encourage with my professional athletes that I work with. Because, it becomes a job, right? And just like any job, it can become daunting, especially with professional athletes where there's so much pressure to perform. It's like hitting sales. You're an asset, essentially. Like if your value is high, you're going to stick around. But if your value is low based on what you're doing on the field or on the court, right, it's very easy to be out of it. So I really encourage them, like, what did you get into playing your sport? Well, like, why did you get into it? Like, because I love it. I'm like, okay, well, can you tap into that? Like, can you love your sport? Can you like understand that you have these very real life things like a job and a mortgage and a family to support and whatever it is? Can you understand and take a look at that and then put it on the shelf? And the second you step on that field, you cross that line, right, to step on the field, And even maybe before that, like it's go time, right? And go and enjoy everything that you have. And when you enjoy things, you're so much more present, right? Our presence is taken away the second we get stuck in our head about things, and that fear of what we're going to lose potentially, or what we're going to look at, or what people are going to think of us, perceptions of us, that takes over, so it's really tapping back into that. So I think that's great advice that you give to your clients.
Gabe, I can't believe this hour has flown.
Totally.
We can talk for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
What?
Let's do it.
Somebody out there wants to find you. Where can they find you?
So you go to my website, aclearmind.com. So it's not just clear mind, but aclearmind.com. I'm also on social media as well, and you can see those links on my website. You can email me through my website and see everything that I do. But yeah, I have workshops that I do. I do individual programs for athletes, whether they're professional or youth athletes. And it's like youth athletes about 14 and older, and working with parents and whoever. So I have a lot of different options to work with me.
Well, I want to thank you for being on Pro Mindset. I want to thank you for your point of view. You got a great point of view, your perspective. You've got an excellent framework for how you coach people. So anybody out there that's looking for coaching, check out Gabe. Thank you, Gabe.
Right. Craig, thank you. Take care.
Hey, it's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and more importantly, I hope you gained a Pro Mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.